the primitive forms of artificial intelligence we already have proved very useful.
AI is a golden opportunity.
How do we ensure that this technology is regulated?
The long arc of technological history is now in an extraordinary new phase.
The AI6 Podcast with Joanne Sweeney.
Michael O'Kane here, and it's my absolute pleasure every Thursday we joined on Good Morning done by Joanne Sweeney of the Digital Training Institute. How are you doing this morning, Joanne?
I'm great to be back with you.
We're going to be talking about how we as consumers of media can identify AI images, AI video, especially in light of some of the recent stuff that was going on online at the moment with the US-Israel versus Iran conflict that's going on right now. So for one, Joanne, we're seeing an influx of AI images online. How are we? So how can we control that? How is that being controlled online?
Yes, we are. And as you will appreciate, at times of high tension and high attention of the public on social media, looking at what is happening through the lens of their phone, there are some people, bad actors, if you want to call them that, who want to create fake images and videos to maybe just get extra likes and get more attention, or to try and deliberately shape the narrative one way or the other. So, we talk about AI a lot, and in fact, artificial intelligence is being used to create fake images and videos. Now, we all have a personal responsibility to not share fake images or videos, but how can you do that when they look so real, right? Because a year ago, when you would have seen an AI-generated image, some of the most common things that you might have noticed were maybe somebody had like an extra finger on their hand, or maybe hair was coming around their face, but it just didn't look natural. But fast forward 12 months and AI has got more sophisticated, as have the tools. So here are some kind of red flags, if you will, in spotting it. And one is like smoothness on the skin. Michael, you probably don't do this, but if you ever swipe on Instagram when you have a photo and you swipe across to the Paris filter because it gives you nice smooth skin.
Sure, yeah.
Well, that's one giveaway.
I think one of us is exposing ourselves at the moment, Joanne. It's not me.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's me. So when you see the skin on an image of a human being look perfect, then that's definitely a red flag. But similarly, not just the skin on a person, but even looking at the background, like the sky or the mountains or the landscape in the background, if that looks completely smooth, then that's a dead giveaway. Also, looking at text, if there's any text in an image, just look to see if it's in some way garbled or mixed up, or if there's a typo, so looking at signs on buildings.
Yeah.
But there's another thing that you need to look for, and this happens again a lot in conflict situations where you might see a fire after, a bomb or a missile or a drone hitting a building. Some people will take the footage from a different period, like a different war in a completely different country, and they'll present it as happening now. You can actually right-click on an image and you can go into the metadata and you can actually see a timestamp. So that's a good way to check whether it's current or whether it's from a completely different context.
Another good way, and you've shared this kind of advice on the show before, is about actually taking, if you're unsure of an image, you can actually take that image into Google itself, and Google can kind of look back and see where the original origin of that image is. Because sometimes, I know I've done it quite a few times just out of curiosity, you do kind of take these images, put them into Google, and you can see, actually that origins comes from, like you said there, it could be a totally different conflict, totally different era and time, but people online are just taking that and trying to put it in a new context. One of the things that you mentioned at the very top of this, Joanne, and I want to kind of touch on it a little bit, is what you mentioned about some of the bad actors out there that are doing this kind of, who are generating this kind of content online. What is their motive? Obviously, there's the kind of motive of getting likes and follows and whatever, but there doesn't seem to be any particular motive other than that, really, or is there? Let me know.
Well, there are other motives. One could be a financial motive. So potentially, if you're monetizing your content on TikTok or YouTube or now Meta, you could potentially be, hoping to increase those likes, those engagements, those views to get more money in your bank account at the end of the month. Although X actually came out in the past week and they've explicitly said that anyone caught producing AI generated video or photos, they will be penalized and potentially could face suspension from the platform. One senior exec in X said, during times of war, it's critical that people have access to authentic information. So monetizing is one. The other is ideological, or political, that somebody might want to create a narrative in the story that something is happening, like that one actor in the war is, doing something that they're not. So there's a political or an ideological motive. And there's one commentator who I was reading from NPR, Jeff Broomfield, and he spoke about the bias and how you can, if you produce a lot of misinformation or disinformation, it's called the liar's dividend. Okay. And the liar's dividend is a concept whereby so much is fake, so much is not authentic, created by AI, that the public then go, well, then nothing's true or what's true. So actually you win in that way by just flooding feeds with fake information. And this is when, radio stations and journalists and mainstream media really come into their own, because you have to be that trusted voice and you get our attention because, hey, we know you are obliged, not just morally, but legally and professionally, to fact check and give us the truth.
Yeah, for sure. And it's something I think just as consumers of media in general, we also have to be kind of doing it for ourselves as well. Like, you have to be really conscious of where you're consuming your media, and especially like we're talking today, how to identify AI generated images and videos online. For anyone who's just tuning in, I'm joined online with Joanne Sweeney of the Digital Training Institute, talking about, especially in the media, I'm sure if anyone has looked online on social media about the US-Israel-Iran conflict going on in the Middle East right now, we've all seen the AI generated images, AI generated videos, and it's becoming a problem because it's kind of, so to speak, forgive the language here, but it's kind of fanning the flame, so to speak, and just creating more conflict out there, which is never what you want. But anyway, another thing that you mentioned before, Joanne, and I think I saw this on a YouTube video before, is in around how AI can get confused by patterns, for instance. So one of the examples I've seen people talking about, especially online around the conflict in the Middle East right now, is fire, and how the inconsistency of fire, because AI can't quite understand what fire is, and kind of identifying those patterns as well.
Yeah, and when we kind of get to video content, there can be a lot more red flags that we can identify. So we know AI is really good at pattern recognition, but with fire is just this big ball of flame. So maybe there's not enough pattern recognition data in it for to accurately identify it. And when also, if you're looking at like the dark sky and then missiles who were brightening up the sky, that's also quite difficult as well, because there's not a lot of context in that photo. So you need context like buildings or landscapes or any other identifiable items in a photo. So when you've just got fire and you've just got dark sky and then a white blob in the sky, that can be pretty difficult. So easy to manipulate. And I guess, that's what we're seeing. We're seeing all of this footage coming. And remember, what bad actors are doing, they're not only taking old clips, but they're curating what people who are watching with their very own eyes and their smartphone, they're taking recordings from social media feeds and they're using that to manipulate it. So it's never been easier because our social feeds are awash with people who are, keeping us up to date with what they're seeing. When you have videos where people are speaking, it can be easier to detect deep fake. So let's say if you're looking at hand-eye coordination, for example, does it look natural? Does it not? If you're looking at audio and speech, Is the mouth moving in line with how the words are coming out? And again, looking at the environment, is it very smooth? But again, as AI becomes more sophisticated, it's becoming increasingly difficult to spot a deep fake. And actually, the government of the UAE have actually said that they will penalize citizens or visitors who are sharing fake information. So people are being extremely careful, because not only can you inadvertently share something that's not right and maybe deceive your followers, but now there could be potentially legal consequences of doing it. So you want to be super, super careful.
One of the other examples then, and you mentioned there about how, AI is just getting more and more advanced. And it is, as AI gets more advanced, it is getting harder to identify these things. One of the biggest examples I've been seeing of this particular conflict online is when, bad actors, or whatever you want to call them online, have taken pre-existing, say, satellite footage of air bases and then posting them online with that image looking damaged or looking like that a certain air base was just struck or whatever. But when in reality, they've just taken the satellite footage and kind of using that image and just enhanced it with AI. How can we identify those things other than kind of the examples we gave before about doing your own due diligence and kind of checking whether or not that is an authentic image?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, it's never been so easy, because you can actually ask AI models to find particular photos for you, and then you can ask these tools to overlay them. Some ways that you can identify those is maybe the color is completely different, from the original footage to something that's been overlaid. So if there's deep contrast in those, that could be a red flag. Also, is there physical equipment that again just looks a bit too 3D and it looks kind of overlaid? Again, that could be a bit of a red flag. There are some tools, like there's one called AIorNot.com.
Okay. Very on the nose.
You can kind of run content through it. Now, again, it's like the AI text detector tool. They're not perfect, but certainly they might help you kind of maybe give you doubts so then that you don't share it. But it's only going to get harder because of voice cloning, video cloning, superimposing images together. The sophistication of the tools is such that it's becoming increasingly difficult. I mean, one thing that I do is I go to a trusted source, and who is the originator of the source is another chip, I think. So if it's just coming from a social net or a social media account that doesn't have a name or is faceless, or, they've got lots of this type of content, you're like, why are they sharing that? You need to try and get to the actual source. And in media, you will always credit your source. So if it's a photographer, if it's a cameraman, if it's a media outlet, they are always credited. So if the content isn't credited, also a red flag.
Okay, very interesting stuff, Joanne. A lot of insightful information there for, I think, the listeners. I know what kind of inspired this conversation is, of course, what's happening right now, the conflict in the Middle East and all this AI-generated imagery that we're seeing online. But also we've talked before, when we bring it back home to Ireland, we've talked about, AI-generated scams, AI deepfakes, all this kind of stuff. How can we as the public who consume media and, we have families who want to protect ourselves and protect our identity, how can we keep up with all of these new developments that are happening, especially when it comes to AI generating new images and video?
Gosh, I wish there was a simple answer. I was having this conversation with a client only in the last couple of days, and her phone rang while we were on a Teams call, and she's like, oh, that's a call from the UK. That must be another scam call. I think our cynicism is really overtaking how we're feeling right now. I mean, I think our level of trust in lots of things is waning. I always think, if in doubt, leave it out. Check your sources and just try and verify what you can. But Michael, honestly, it feels right now, from WhatsApps, phone calls, what we're seeing in our social media feeds, it's becoming quite overwhelming to understand what is real and what is not. But if you've got a bit of a gut instinct that maybe it's not true, go to a trusted source. I think more than ever, we really need to rely on our media and our journalists whose job it is to report factual information. Also, you've got like Garda Síochána are really good at updating us on scams. Your bank, actually, whoever bank you're with, follow them on social and have a look at what they're saying the current scams are. And then you've got kind of government agencies like the Consumer Protection Commission, CCPC. They're very good at alerting us. So, follow trusted sources, I think, is a really important tip.
Okay, very well said. And interesting as well, follow your intuition. Like you said there, like when in doubt, leave it out. I think it's very good to hear. Joanne Sweeney of the Digital Training Institute, thank you so much as always for joining us here on Good Morning Dublin for our Thursday digital download. If any of our listeners want to connect with you, learn more about your podcast, your book and the Digital Training Institute, where can they go to find out more?
Thanks, Michael. Well, go to digitaltraining.ie or you can search for AI6, the podcast, on your favourite podcast platform.